Welcome to the Boom Clap podcast where culture and conviction collide. I'm Rita Rogers.
And I'm Cecily Dickey.
All right, before we hop in with Ginny Yurich, we have her on with us today. I just want to invite you to check out our sponsor, Rocasa Organics. You can use the code BOOMCLAP to save 20% at rocasaorganics.com. All right, hi, Ginny. We are so happy to have you with us again today.
I'm thrilled to be back, and I love the both of you. I love your show, and it is always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Well, the feeling is definitely mutual. We just love you as well. Like your smiling face at 9 o'clock in the morning is a good thing to see. So before we get into the nitty gritty conversation here, maybe we can just catch up on where you've been. You did a tour with Really Very Crunchy, and I loved watching that through social media. I didn't get to attend, but I loved watching it through social media because it was just such a fun thing, and you could see how much fun you were having. So I don't know if you want to tell us anything about that.
Yeah, it was so much fun. We did a 5-city tour with this company called Transparent. Oh, I just butchered it. We say TPR, so I don't. It's probably called Transparent Production. I don't know what the R is.
Isn't that funny when there's an acronym for something, suddenly you can't remember what the actual words are?
They did a fantastic job. They do a ton of people's tours, like the Bluey tour and Dude Perfect and all of these musical artists. Wow. So it was an incredible opportunity. It took us 18 months from ideation to the actual tour. We also had some other friends with us, this band, husband and wife duo called This Way Home. So it was like a variety show night. It was like skit, video, bumpers that told this story, and music and comedy and inspiration. I think people were like, I don't really know what this is, but we got such wonderful feedback afterwards. The show's almost sold out, which was incredible for a first time out. And people, we didn't have any footage or anything. People were like, what is this? That was so cool.
That's amazing. And actually hearing you describe it as what is this is actually, I wonder if that's how you feel about the trajectory of 1,000 hours outside in general. This is something Rita and I were talking about. Like, you have done so much, and what you've done is so needed. Like, people have embraced the 1,000 hours outside movement just wholeheartedly. And it's been life-changing for so many people, just like it was life-changing for you. But I can imagine that maybe when it started and you just started sharing about how being outside with your kids was changing things for you, and it started just turning into more and more and more, and it just kind of snowballed. I can imagine you maybe even feeling in that, like, what is this? Like, what is this? What is happening?
Yes.
And it's turned into this whole thing.
Yeah, especially because at the beginning, for years, not just for like a couple weeks or a couple months, but for several years, people were like, that's really weird what you're doing. So it is a what is this? And I was just talking to a woman yesterday, Molly DeFrank. She has a new book coming out called Mothering Boys. And at the end of her book, she talks about this man named Dr. Chris Winter, who wrote these books about sleep. And kids' sleep. And it was really good. He talked about like lux and light and blue light at night and light outside and all of those things. And he messaged one time and was like, I would like you to have me on your podcast and help me to promote my book. And I was like, well, I've never had a guest on a podcast. Like, I'd done a couple episodes by myself and shelved it because I was like, this is weird. I'm talking on a little microphone on my phone in my basement and the kids are waking up. So I'd done like 7 episodes and was like, this is not for me. And he reached out and I was like, well, I'd like to help someone launch their book. That seems like a cool thing. And then, what is this here? It's we're close to 500 episodes later. And it's,
wild.
Often a top 3 podcast, if not a top 10 podcast for parents in the country.
That's amazing.
It is wild.
It is. Yeah. That's the best word to describe it. Like, you had recently posted where you were at with your downloads, and it was like millions and millions and millions. What was it?
Yeah, we hit 10 million and we're almost at 11.
That's crazy. Unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, it's believable because, Ginny, you really are just someone like who is so easy to listen to. And you have the most interesting guests, and you do such a good job interviewing them. So it's not unbelievable in that sense. It's just most people will never accomplish that when they do a podcast. And it's just so cool when it happens to someone who it really should happen to. So we've
definitely
loved watching
credit
it.
the Lord. Definitely credit the Lord for sure. And feel that this is a message that is about really child wellness and family wellness as a whole in a day and age where there are a lot of attacks on children. And Kim Jong-un referred to it as the undeclared war on childhood. And I think that since he wrote his book where it said that, I mean, it's just even gotten more obvious, right? With technology, with the food, with the education system, like all of these things, they are taking out children, and pharmaceuticals would be in there. I mean, all of these, not every single instance, but there are a lot of cases where children are suffering off of adults who are making money off of them. The toy industry, I mean, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would even say, like, at this point, it's a kind of a declared war at this point. People know it.
That should be the title of his next book. The Declared War on Childhood.
Yeah.
I agree, Rita.
So sticking along those lines that what Cecily brought up, we have been talking about this lately, just how you're so niche and you're purposeful in your mission. And I personally feel this, and I'm guessing a lot of other women will relate that are listening, but it's so easy this day and age to have shiny object syndrome and to move from thing to thing to thing, especially when you're multi-passionate and maybe can pick up something and run with it. Maybe not as well as somebody else, but you could pick it up and run with it. And I feel that. And so you have stuck with something. You have found your thing. Like Cecily said, maybe you didn't know what it was. Maybe you didn't even know it was your thing right away, but you have found something and stuck with it. What advice would you have to women who, like, now living in America or Canada in 2025, where you have a phone and you have access to all this information and access to just pick something up and run with it, unlike decades before? What advice would you have for women to know how to discern what's the right thing?
That's a really good question. From my perspective, I think that there is a bucket. So in my case, when we went outside, this was like the beginning of 1,000 Hours Outside, and I went out very skeptical. This was not anything I ever started based off of research. It was started based off of experience of being a mom that was struggling and then having this period of time outside, 3-4 hours, that changed the entire trajectory of mothering. And then as I learned, it changed the trajectory of child development. So when you go outside, it's their physical, it's their emotional, it is their spiritual, it's their social, and it's their cognitive development. So that really is a bucket of things. And it's mental health of the mother, and it's the well-being of the family. And so I think that any topic that you would pick is going to have a larger bucket. So if you're going to pick health, I'm interested in health of my family. Well, that's going to include sourdough. That's going to probably include maybe minimalism or how you set up the indoors of your house. If you are interested in being a mom boss, mompreneur, whatever people say, that's a bucket, right? Which is like, well, how do we balance that with having a family, and how does family life fit into that? So to me, I think you just take a step back and you say, okay, this is about getting outside, yes, but it really is about something a lot bigger. It's about the wellness of children. It's about the wellness of family. It's about the mental health of mothers and fathers. And it's about this undeclared war on childhood to a degree. And what are the influences and the things that are, sort of sticking their swords into that? And I would believe that any passion that someone has an underlying bucket.
That's really good. And that's so
really
true.
Helpful. Yeah.
That's so true.
And also, I don't think people have a lane. People will come and they'll tell you, they'll say, stay in your lane. But like, who determines what your lane is? And life is about growth. And so maybe that's your bucket. My bucket is growth. I'm out there learning about things. And here's what I learned about. I mean, I've definitely had that. Like, I posted about seed oils. I read this book called Dark Calories. It changed my life. It made me really understand what's going on with our food, our metabolism, our excessive hunger, pathological hunger. Well, I read that book personally for me. And then it was so good. I reached out to the author and people were really mad. I mean, a lot of people said, stay in your lane, stay in your lane.
Really?
I was like, well, this is part of my lane because this is the book I read. So, I mean, also you can, it's your growth. And what if we just took it even to that high of an umbrella, that the thing I'm interested in is the thing I'm interested in. And that's what I'm going to post about.
So good, Ginny. I can see everyone listening and just being like, okay, my bucket. What's my bucket? What's in my bucket? You know?
I feel like I have a really big bucket, and sometimes that makes it hard because, like,
no, I think it's good.
You know, like my mind is everywhere. You know,
yeah,
all at once.
I would bet that there is an underlying theme to it.
Yeah, there definitely.
And also, Austin Kleon, who wrote these phenomenal books about creativity, says, "Don't throw any of yourself away," and that was a really life-changing sentence for me, because I do think in this day and age, because there's this expectation to narrow to something for the sake of your social media account, which is so ridiculous.
It is.
It's like there is a pressure to throw parts of yourself away. And so I remind myself of that a lot.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Okay, so you had the Really Very Crunchy tour. Is there going to be a part 2?
We're in talks. It was, you know how those things go. It was wonderful. It was also a considerable amount of work.
Yeah,
so we're trying to figure it out, juggling kids and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's actually a meeting about it later today. And so stay tuned.
We shall see. All right. That's great, Ginny. So you guys, I just double checked. We had Ginny on before. It was October 1st, 2023. So what is that? Like a year and a half ago.
Yeah. I was thinking that I had a really little one then. I was trying to remember last night.
Yeah.
You had just had a baby. You were holding the baby.
Yes.
Okay, I thought he was on the podcast with us.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. He was making adorable little sounds. And
So I think you were just like right out. I mean, I feel like you just had him. He was little.
A few months. Yeah. That's really cool. But anyway, guys, so if you want to hear that episode, go back and listen. It's episode 124. You're going to get a lot of Ginny's story in that one. And it's just excellent. For the days where you just feel like a crappy mom, like we all have, that is such a good episode to listen to just hear one mom's story of how her life changed by something that's just so simple. And then you'll see what she's done since then.
Hey, this is Troy from Apologetics Canada. Have you ever noticed universities don't wait until students arrive on campus to figure out their basketball or volleyball team? Instead, they're actively engaging long before they come onto campus, and it should be the same when it comes to our faith. Research consistently shows that the transition from high school to university and career is a crucial time for faith development. Those students who are equipped and connected going into university and career are often the ones who emerge with their faith intact and are often the ones who share their faith with others. For this reason, Apologetics Canada and Trinity Western University are excited to introduce the first ever Western Youth Summit, happening May 24th, 2025 on Trinity Western University's Langley campus. What is the Western Youth Summit? Well, it isn't another youth rally. Not that those are bad, but this is about identifying, equipping, and connecting students for life in high school and beyond. We're going to have an amazing group of speakers addressing a wide range of relevant topics. There will also be a session in the morning for parents. Students will be connected with trusted Christian ministries from high school to university. For example, if your son or daughter is heading off to university, we want to introduce them to campus ministries long before they get there to help them transition into Christian community. As well, we want to let them know about various scholarship and award opportunities. Early bird registration ends April 14th. Spots are limited, so head to the website westernyouthsummit.ca and register today. Make sure to follow Apologetics Canada on our socials for more details.
But let's shift gears a little bit. Ginny, you are in your bucket, I should say, is this undeclared war on childhood.
Yeah.
And let's use that to shift gears into probably the heavier part of our conversation is you have gone through immense church hurt in the last year. So tell us that story, because really it is linked to that war on childhood, which is why you're not being silent about this.
Correct. So I'll give a couple prefaces. First of all, I think in a lot of mom podcasts, kids listen in. So there's little kid ears. And so I just want to be clear that I will do my best to have it be little kid language approved. Mm-hmm. However, it may be one you want to listen to ahead of time before, your kids are hearing. And also, a lot of people have gone through sexual abuse, and as children especially. The numbers currently are really high, 1 in 4 for women by the time they hit 18 and 1 in 6 for boys. I mean, this is a considerable issue currently. And so also, if you have that trauma in your background, I just want to also put that caveat out there as this is a heavier topic. I want to frame it in the light of what happened and what we've learned. I also want to frame it in the light of that God is powerful and God can redeem in a lot of different ways situations that you've been in. I would say explicitly up front that none of our children, thank goodness, were actually physically harmed. Mm-hmm. So people say sometimes that rejection is God's protection. So I just want to sort of lay that framework. And I also want to talk about what we've learned and what we would have done differently, knowing what we know now. I held this before you hopped on, Rita, but I showed Cecily. I was like, these are the books that I've gone through in the last year or so as a stack of about 10, because we've been trying to frantically sort of figure out what happened. So the overview of the situation is that we love the Lord and we love God's church. My husband grew up as a pastor's kid, and I grew up going to church from the time I was a baby. I like to read the Bible. I think the Bible is full of promises for a better life. And we started attending a church post-COVID where some friends were and homeschool friends were, in particular for our older kids. So this is a situation, if you homeschool, where as your kids get older, it becomes a little harder to find friendships because maybe kids go back to public school, interests change. And so we were involved with this homeschool basketball program, and a lot of the kids went to this church. And in fact, the lead pastor, and I want to say the name of the church for the sake of accountability and also for the sake of, if you live in this area, I think it's very important that you know. So the church is called Community Bible Church. It's in Brighton, Michigan. And the lead pastor was on the board for this homeschool basketball league that we were in, and he coached a team. And so it felt like a very safe place. What we have learned is that you can't go off of that. Right. You can't. You have to be very diligent and vigilant in this day and age because this is rampant. Pornography is rampant. The ability to access children is rampant. All of these apps are rampant. And then there's AI on top of it all. So there's a lot going on. We no longer live in a day and age where I think you can just blindly trust because someone has a title that they are living in a way that what your mind would equate that title to be. So that's one of the things that we learned. But what happened is that there was a youth pastor there. Now we were new to this, kids going into youth group, a youth pastor. And over the course of about a year, we had some really odd run-ins with him. And when I say odd, and I'll give one, here's an example. I signed up to work in the youth group. They handed out a paper. I checked off the name to work in the youth group. We had 3 kids in the youth group. I have a master's degree in education. I was a public school teacher for high school and middle school. I've worked with youth groups before. So it was a good fit, already bringing our kids up there. And this youth pastor came up to me when no one else was around, and this was this common scenario. And he said, my requirement for working in the youth group to be a youth group volunteer is that you have to give a 2-year commitment and you can't miss 1 week. And I was like, that's weird. Like I've never heard of that in my life. And he knew that we traveled some to speak at conferences. So, I missed maybe 4 a year or something like that, not a ton. And then that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And I thought that's weird. I like to read the Bible, and it says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the word is cannot. So to me, that's not biblical, and that's odd. And so, there was a situation where he took a personal bullying situation that was going on, personal to our family, a really big deal. We know of a child who took his life at age 15 due to bullying. Bullying can be a very big deal. And he took our bullying situation and took it to another family in the church. Wasn't on staff. And that caused a huge breakdown in our community because he also lied. So the youth pastor does this. So there's like these little things that are going on. Now, as a churchgoer, I've heard all my life, no church is perfect. The church is full of imperfect people. And so there is this fine line between saying stuff and not saying stuff. And what have I learned is that if a pastor is not following scripture, I think you should leave. I think in the future, we would leave. I think that the qualifications for leadership are clear in the Bible, and that you have to be above reproach, which is like nothing sticks if people throw it at you. And obviously there's imperfect people in the church, but for leadership, God has a different standard. So our whole community fell apart because this youth pastor takes this personal situation of ours, lies about it, spreads it to this other family. They spread it to a bunch of other families. And we found ourselves in this situation where we lost our whole community. And that is very, very, very significant. Our kids were crying every single night. Their friends, just every night someone was crying, hysterical. I was confused. And because they were upset, and they still had a couple different friends at the youth group, they would still go. They had, some other friends, but what happened was the youth pastor, our kids sort of stopped responding to him. Like, they're mad at him, or they don't like him, or he caused all these problems for them. And they know that he did it. And so he came up to me once again. There's nobody around, no friend, no child of mine. We were in a public place in the gym at the church, but I'm isolated in that way. And he came up and confronted me about why our 12-year-old son was no longer returning his affections, basically. He goes like this, is very confrontational. What have you been saying at home to your son about me? He used to come up and do this and exclaim my name, and now he doesn't. And what have you been saying? It was like that. And I was just completely blown away. And it was such a heated conversation that this other woman that I didn't know was like, you need to take your conversation elsewhere. This is upsetting my daughters. So it was like to that level and super weird. Why would you? We're not at home talking about you to our preteen son, but you have ruined all of his friendships. So, or most of his friendships, or these family friends that we have. So this is why it's what you did, that type of thing. And his brother is upset. It was that. Well, then he confronted our son a couple weeks later at church. Same sort of situation. He wasn't around anybody else and said, what's going on? And anyways, our son came home and collapsed to the floor crying hysterically. And so these are weird. These are just weird things. That's weird. You're 44 years old. You're married. You're 43. You're in your 40s. You're married. You have children. Why would you care if a preteen boy returns your affections or not? So that was around the holidays in 2023, right after I talked with you. And then we were into conference season and holidays, and we were flailing. I started to get a bunch of different books to sort of figure out what was going on. I've got this stack of 10 here. And what we ended up doing in March, so we made our way through the basketball season. That's what I told you about. There was this connection there. I was coaching, my husband was coaching. All 7 of us were involved in this basketball program. So we, just try to sort of keep a low profile and do our commitments. And then when that ended, I just felt like, what? I thought people would reach out and be like, we did something wrong. People have conviction, I've had conviction in my life where you're like, hey, you know what? I said that way and I shouldn't have. So kind of all along, I'm thinking that's probably going to happen. And come March, it's been 5 months of crying, 4 months of crying, and nothing had happened. No one said anything. These relationships are broken. And so we decided to let our kids write letters to the church. Every one of our children wrote letters to the church, 5 children. And then my husband and I wrote letters. Mine was 15 pages. It included about a half a dozen. Here's where this man didn't follow scripture. Here's where man didn't follow scripture. Here's where he confronted me about our kid, what our kid's response to him. And our son's letter, our preteen son's letter said, this man says, I love you. This man gives me hugs. I feel uncomfortable. It's creepy. I haven't known him for that long. He seemed to get mad at me when I stopped, amongst other things. And, the other kids' letters were like, this man makes fun of homeschoolers. This man ruined my friendships. I cry myself to sleep every night because I hardly had any friends to begin with. And now I don't have those. And please fix this. Please help me. And so we send these letters in, and mine said, you need to bring in an outside counselor to review the situation. That's a Christian. It's an egregious amount of things that are not above reproach. We didn't know about grooming at that time, like that exact wording. But, an adult man should not ever question a kid about why they're not returning affections. It doesn't matter. They shouldn't care about that. And we send in these letters, and a week, maybe a week or so later, we get a response from the lead pastor who says, I read your letters. We're taking them under review. Basically, we care about this. We're going to outline a plan to proceed. So then, a week and a half later or so, we get an email from a different pastor who says that before we proceed further, you need to come in with your child, your preteen, and have a meeting with me. And we didn't know this man. He's a staff member. We didn't know him. With me and an unnamed attorney. We were like, no, like, who does that? That's so weird. It was so weird. We got outside counsel from a healthcare professional, and we were like, this seems really odd that we never said anything criminal happened. Why would we bring I don't know. It was so odd. So they didn't even say who the attorney was. They were like, it's a Christian woman and she deals with these things, but they wouldn't say who she was. And so my husband responded and said, we're not comfortable with this as you've outlined. But to reiterate, we're not alleging anything criminal. And he put like serious/legal, right, in response to bringing our kid in to meet with an attorney that we don't know. Mm-hmm. And then he said, but if you have further questions, let me know and we'll wait to hear what your next steps are. So this pastor responds the next day and says, we'll be in touch. And then about 3 weeks later, they kicked us out of the church. And they kicked us out of the church with a certified letter in the mail and an email, same content. It was on May 3rd. And we sent our letters in mid-March, and May 3rd. We didn't even have a conversation with them. And the letter is like one of the most nasty letters I've ever read, wrapped in Christianese. We care about you, but we will not allow you to be liars and gossips and falsely accused. And we did a comprehensive investigation into the issues. I mean, these are the words they use. A comprehensive investigation into the issues you raised. The evidence reviewed, meticulously upheld the integrity of our leadership and the gossip. And so it was devastating. It was devastating.
I'm not sure if I've ever heard of anybody getting kicked out of a church, like a family.
I know.
Yeah, via
that's
certified
what my mom
letter.
Said. That's something that's on my soul forever. I'm nervous to go to any other church. So we got kicked out of the last one. Like who wants a family that's been kicked out of a church? So it was really, really a big deal. Mm-hmm. And we felt like we got kicked out for doing the right thing. So what happened was we got kicked out on May 3rd. And as you can imagine, as like devastated as I feel, it was really more devastated for my children who had their whole faith in church leadership just crushed. Like I thought, can you imagine having a 10-year-old girl, getting a letter from a 10-year-old girl that says, I cry myself to sleep every night because I lost the few friends that I had. Or getting a letter from a 7-year-old girl that says, please fix this. Please help us, And so I had to be the one that said, they're not going to. And we had to sort of go down that path about, I guess sometimes there's wolves in sheep's clothing. That's what I've learned from this woman named Diane Langberg, that some pastors are not shepherds. They're wolves that eat the sheep and for their own sustenance. So we get kicked out of the church on May 3rd with a certified letter in the mail. I sometimes joke about that, like WWJD bracelet that I wore growing up. Like, what would Jesus do if a kid was like, please help me? Well, maybe he would kick you out with the certified letter in the mail. So
not funny, but
I try to add some humor. On May 3rd, we get kicked out. On December 2nd, this man got caught in a sting operation by some teenage YouTubers. And if not for these teenage YouTubers, he would probably still be on staff. He got caught on a sting operation trying to have intercourse, intimacy with a 15-year-old teen male. And they met on Grindr, which is an app for that type of thing. And there's a police report that an investigative journalist from Julie Roy's report who investigates churches. The church has never come out, not even to their membership. They've said nothing to the community at all.
Wow.
Nothing. And to their membership, the first email they sent said that he had non-criminal, used the phrase non-criminal allegations have been made, which is because there was discrepancy if the boy was 16 or 15. And is he of age of consent in Michigan? So that was confusing for a long time. They've never said that he had. So in December 2nd, he gets caught in the sting operation. December 9th, he resigned. because that's maybe when the church found out there's a lot of weird details that nobody knows. And then on December 18th, they turned his computer into the police. I don't know why there was that much of a time gap between those things. But then that's when they started this investigation in our county. And he was charged in the following February, so about 6 weeks later, with 9 felony counts, all dealing with criminal sexual misconduct with minors and tampering with evidence. And the police report we just FOIA'd, so there's been 2 police reports because one, he tried to be with this 15-year-old with this sting operation, or 16. I don't think anybody really totally knows. And that one's got like the screenshots of him sending, his body parts, pictures to this kid. I mean, it's so awful. But the police report that came out when they got his computer is just, it's just unbelievably dark. And, his web searches and it's basically said this is evidence that he was seeking to have intimate relations with a minor male, young. So
but
when we started
this came out, the church said they
non-criminal allegations,
and they're not really sure if they're concerned because it might be a 16-year-old.
They didn't even give any details of that. They just said non-criminal allegations have come forth, and so he's resigned. Wow. So then we started to go public because we did the right thing, and we were kicked out for it. And they said that they did a comprehensive investigation, but nobody talked to us. So we're like, well, comprehensive and investigation, those words have meanings. And you said you reviewed your evidence and it meticulously upheld. Well, how did you review your evidence? Now we've been speaking out since December. We're recording in April. It's been 4 months. They have never come forth with any evidence of their investigation, any evidence of how they reviewed the evidence. And then they started a public smear campaign against our family. So not only are they not coming out with any of the truth or any of these questions, but in the initial email where they said, this youth pastor, he's resigned, he has non-criminal allegations, there is a family on social media that is using social media to create a false narrative about the situation. They declined multiple attempts. These are exact wording. They declined multiple attempts to meet, thus limiting the scope of the investigation. And that we were threatening to them because my husband did respond they didn't even tell us. So wait, let me back up. The man resigns on December 9th. On December 14th, they let the youth group parents know. It was a Saturday. They did not tell us that this happened, even though we had sent in, our preteen boy had sent in things that said, this man makes me feel uncomfortable. He says, I love you. And he wasn't like a gushy guy. He was kind of a cold guy. So it becomes this whole public smear campaign where we've been kicked out of all these other churches. Ask around. I mean, it's so mean. Ask around about the Yuriches and you'll hear what they're really like. They harass officials at church. And it was just, they left their kid with a groomer. They let him continue to come. And it was like, well, we didn't know. What we have learned since, and this is really important, is when an adult is trying to form intimate relations with children, they groom not only the child, but they also groom the adults that are the protective barrier. And so looking back, when this man said, I couldn't work in the youth group for this reason that I found out later he didn't apply to anyone else but me. Everybody else, they went on a vacation. They went to go visit their daughter in Alaska. Wow. They went camping to Tennessee. Like, it was only a rule that was applied to me. That's grooming. He groomed me. To and I would imagine that possibly behind the scenes, he said all of these negative things about our family. I don't know where it's all of that is coming from, but that's what abusers do, is that they twist it that you're the problem. So you can't be credible. And so we have been dealing with this for months, where the church body has not had any communications. So people are sending us stuff behind the scenes. We get no communications. The reason that we even found out in the first place is because a friend of ours got the communication and called us and said, he resigned. Something happened. And they haven't released the police reports. It's all investigative reporting or FOIA to show how serious it is. And so there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah. Ginny,
Wow.
I'm just thinking about the fact that like you were kicked out of a church via certified letter with no chance to like talk it out and explain really what's going on, or to have some sort of feedback from those letters beyond that first initial contact from the lead pastor, which was also written, like no face-to-face, nothing, without the threat of a lawyer being there.
Yeah.
But then the additional emotional trauma, honestly, of knowing how close it was for your son.
Yeah.
Had you guys not spoken up.
Yeah.
Like that is, I'm so sorry.
It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. And I think, we want to share for the sake of the safety and well-being of children that this happens. I mean, this is a mega church in our area, very respected. And this thing happened just the other day, yesterday actually, where nobody knows except for what we have posted. And then we went to that Julie Roy's report and they did an investigative reporting where they pulled the Mason, it was in Mason, Michigan, where he went and had a 15-year-old or 16-year-old. It's not totally clear. The kid said he was 15, but maybe he was 16. That part is unclear. It shouldn't matter. But the kid got in his car, like actually got in his car. It was a sting operation. And so none of those details have been shared at all. And, they're trying to sort of say like this was his personal life. And yet the police report specifically says he was messaging on church property. Like they're able to get the location. The police report
matter.
Right.
I mean, it might matter legally, but from a Christian biblical perspective, that does not matter.
Right. And so we've been learning, I ended up taking, because the church has this big stamp on their website where you go to the kids part that says ministry safe. And they're part of this organization called Ministry Safe, which is a 5-pronged approach. I've researched it quite a bit, meant to keep children safe. And I feel like that's false advertising because I actually paid for and did the training because I was like, well, what are they teaching these people?
Good for you, Ginny.
And it was interesting because it made me think, well, I probably would have had to go through that training if I would have been allowed to be a volunteer. But I wasn't allowed to be a volunteer because there was a rule that only applied to me. And in the video, it said that there are 2 types of offenders. One is like an abductor offender. It's 5% of cases. Those are, I think, the sensationalized ones you hear in the news quite a bit. The other 95% are what are called preferential offenders, where they are attracted to children. They have a preference of age and gender. So this is very clear in the police report that it seems to be this of the offenders. But there's these 2 options. And it specifically says that a preferential offender is only there for access to children. So this is not a private, this isn't your private life. You chose a profession with access to children and you are a child predator. The web searches, just jaw-droppingly disgusting. And they specifically say this is only a small portion, but this would prove, what he's interested in, what he was trying to do. And they have not told the community. They haven't even really told their members either. They've just said disturbing things and, might come out. More things might come out. But anybody who they have a basketball ministry where they pull in kids from the community. You know how big churches are. They've got this homeschool day. So my point is this homeschool program that met there, not affiliated with the church, they just stepped out. They said, we will not meet here anymore. They found out through us, our postings that have spread out and now gone to the news and things like that. They found out through us that as the start that this happened. And they ran a homeschool program in this building where he had an office right next to the gym in the basement and nobody told them. And the church said to them, we only told the ones that he had direct contact with. And you're like,
that you know of.
That you know of. And the police report specifically said that. It said tons of things have been deleted. They said he had a friend with benefits, age 18. that knew about his personal situation and family. And it said, we cannot confirm whether this kid is from the youth group or not. And this got deleted. And so they're sending this message that they specifically said law enforcement has confirmed that this has not affected anybody here.
Well, it sounds like the church is being really tying themselves to the legality of everything and what the law is, but not the law that's in the Bible,
Right. And I would agree with you because I felt like that from the very beginning, which is if you send communications, and ours was 7 letters, so different perspectives. We had 3 kids that were in the youth group at the time. And there was documentation. Like there was a documentation of the text my husband got that was like, the pastor asked me to reach out to you about the bullying situation, but it had been lied about. And we're like, well, you're not even on staff. Like, why would a pastor ever reach out to you? What's happening? Why is there a go-between here? That's not biblical. And so there was proof. It's just really an interesting thing. It's not like it was even hearsay. Right. Some people tried to use the word like your intuition, but we're like, no, this wasn't intuition. This was like documented chapter and verse, chapter and verse, chapter and verse. And some people have said, well, what were they supposed to do? And it's like, well, God has a law. God has a standard, to your point. And I think the standard of above reproach has to be there for anybody who works with a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, as parents, we should be able to expect, right? Not that we don't do our due diligence like you did in this situation, but we should be able to expect that.
Hi, I'm Rita's daughter. Today, while my mom was recording the podcast, my sister and I took some time to watch World Watch.
What's your favorite thing about watching World Watch News?
It's a fun way to learn about things going on around the world.
It is fun, and it's also a great way for your kids to learn how to consume the news with discernment. World Watch News comes from a biblical perspective and a Christian worldview. If you want to learn about World Watch News and how you can get 90 days free, go to the link in our show notes or use the code BOOMCLAP25 to get 90 days free.
So in our last, 10, 15 minutes here, let's really zone in on what you want to talk about, which is what you learned, what you would do differently. And then you have resources for people too, because I know parents listening are going to be like, okay, I'm a little shook because, obviously my kids are in youth group or my kids are at a place where I think I can trust, but thinking we can trust, as you've learned, doesn't necessarily mean you can. So what would you say to equip parents?
So I would say to really challenge the church is full of broken people narrative. The church is full of broken people, but leaders are held to a higher standard. So if there is a leader in your church that is not following the Bible and you are unable to have a conversation about it, and I know that these things are really tricky. There's like real life and there's also your perception. And, you don't want to be the parent that's nagging. And that's what they've said about us. People have called the church to ask questions and then they'll report back to me and say, the church says, well, that family's annoying. They overparent.
Wow.
I mean, it happened just a couple of days ago. So this guy is clearly an issue. And they're going to say that we overparented because we sent in concerns that included psychological grooming of a child. So if you have any biblical concerns, I think that about a leader, and especially about a leader that works with children, I think that you are obligated to say something. And if it's not met with humility, it's not like necessarily it's always true. There can be explanations for things, or it's not met with, it might be a small thing. Like, yeah, you're right. Like you should be allowed to work in the youth group. I don't know why. That is a ridiculous standard. That type of thing. Then if you can't find that, I don't think that you should stay in this day and age. That's my opinion. That's really pervasive. Like when you talk about culture, church culture is, it's very excusing. There's sinners in the church. But we're not talking about the sinners. We're talking about the leaders. And above reproach is obviously not perfect, but nothing should be able to stick. So that's one of the biggest things I learned. The second thing I learned is I learned about grooming. And I did not know about grooming really at all. I'd heard the word, but I did not understand that a child groomer also grooms the gatekeepers. This is a big thing that I've learned. So that man actually probably did groom the other staff too, to a degree.
Right.
Like I think in our case, he probably seeded a bunch of doubt about our parenting. We're over parents, we're annoying, we cause all these problems, whatever the things that he said, he groomed that whole situation for the sake of gaining access to the child. So I read a book called Protecting the Gift. I highly recommend. It is by Gavin DeBecker. My midwife recommended it. Keeping children and teenagers safe and parents sane. Safety skills for children outside the home. Warning signs of sexual abuse. How to screen babysitters and choose schools. Strategies for keeping teenagers safe from violence. Highly, highly recommend it. Gavin DeBecker, Protecting the Gift. You could also, ironically, go to Ministry Safe. It was $15 for me to take the training. And I think it was really good. I learned quite a bit from that training. I wish I would have maybe had it beforehand and have questions about all the volunteers and staff who the church advertises that has taken that training and where things fell apart. But I do think that learning about grooming is incredibly important, and also to trust your instincts. Like if you're like, ugh, that was really weird. Why does he care if my kid's hugging him? Like why would any 44-year-old or 43-year-old man married with children have any concern at all about returned affection? He said in that conversation, if your kids hate me, I can't be their youth pastor. I was like, that's weird. Who says that? Yeah. That's like spiritually manipulative. Nobody said they hated you. So I think we have to be extra discerning in this day and age due to the day and age that we live in. This man had access. So in the police report, it said he was on this Grindr app since May of 2023. Wow. We sent in our concerns in March of 2024. He was on staff until December of 2024. So that's 18 months or so at the very least. That was the first thing that they were able to find on his computer or phone that said it was expiring. His subscription was expiring in May of 2023. So at the very least, for 18 months, he had been on that app, and they said some of the communications, like I said, had come from church property. There was concerning things on his church computer. So also, if you are on staff at a church, people have said, how in the world could he have had concerning things on his work computer? Like, did they not have the software and everything you see gets sent to somebody else, like the Covenant Eyes type thing? What? He worked with kids and they didn't have the appropriate like firewall type stuff on his computer. So, I mean, I obviously think that's incredibly important. And for people, I guess the biggest thing is that we're not alone. I have gotten message after message after message, whether it dealt with child situation or not, of people who say, I brought up a concern and we got pushed out. This sort of similar situation, and or there's a church a stone's throw away from this one where the worship pastor was videotaping. Oh, this is insane. He had a video camera set up a pen camera set up in the bathroom and had been videotaping people in this like single stall behind the stage where people get ready for the worship team for like years. And that happened there. And then someone messaged me just this week. We are at this church. It's maybe 20 miles from here, where a man, the youth pastor, was charged with 60 counts. So this is extremely common. It's common, as sobering as that is. So here are the resources that have helped my heart. There's a woman named Diane Langberg who has written the most powerful books. She works with victims of church abuse, spiritual abuse, any type of abuse that happens in the church. And it is called Redeeming Power, Understanding Authority and Abuse in the Church by Diane Langberg. And she has another one called When the Church Harms God's People. And she has another one called Suffering in the Heart of God. So those have been really, really helpful for me. I have a book called Safe Church. I haven't finished this one. Safe Church, How to Guard Against Sexism and Abuse in Christian Communities. I've read just a smidgen of this one by Dr. Andrew J. Bauman. And this one has been really good. And I also read a book called Bully Pulpit about narcissism in the church. We have another book. Actually, my stack is bigger. I must not have brought everything. I think there's a couple in my purse.
I love your stacks of books.
I know, it's so great.
I think this is really confusing. And the one that really helped me understand it, though, was this Diane Langberg, Redeeming Power, Understanding Authority and Abuse in the Church, because she said they're not shepherds. And they have this word pastor. So they're automatically believed. So when they put out a statement that says, this family declined multiple meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't decline anything. We declined to bring our kid to meet with your unnamed attorney, but that's not declining multiple meetings. It's not even declining one. It's declining a particular situation. To say that we limited the scope of the investigation when we're the ones who sent in the 7 letters, like it starts to explain the sort of tactics that people might use. Mm-hmm. Yeah, image repair tactics. So all of that has been incredibly helpful. And I can send you a whole list for your show notes of all of the books that we have here now.
That would be amazing.
About this topic that we didn't used to have. And then there is a podcast called Julie Roys, which is spelled Roys. And this is what she's dedicated her life to. They're the ones who did the initial investigation and found that he had this sting operation, been caught in the sting operation. And no one else has posted that. Like the church has not let people know that's what happened.
Did you all reach out to her and initiate that? Okay.
Mm-hmm. We reached out to them and they have been wonderful. So they just did the initial report where there was only one police report. They haven't done a follow-up where the second one, which is 19 pages, shows his web search history. This is when they got his computer and those types of things. So he is currently charged with 9 felonies. He has had 2 court dates that have gotten pushed back. We actually went to both. And now there's another one for May. So, I mean, I think your point, Rita, was such a good one because he will be dealt with as far as the law is concerned. The issue, and possibly, I don't know, I wouldn't say bigger, but a separate and also major issue is how the church handled it and continues to handle it. Mm-hmm. That's the issue because no child is safe if you can't bring forth concerns. Mm-hmm. If you bring forth concerns and you are kicked out of your community, which is so painful. I mean, all of the talk about loneliness and it's worse than smoking. And I mean, the amount of turmoil that caused for our family and our kids was astronomical. Mm-hmm. And they didn't do anything wrong. And they're taking that as their view of church. So if people cannot come forth and say, yeah, something's going on with this guy, something's off, here's some red flags, he's not following the Bible. And you can get kicked out. And then a public smear campaign. It was from church staff, church members, high profile volunteers that are on the stage, fake accounts and anonymous accounts. Mm-hmm. That's pretty rough.
It is.
And it sounds like without you, like knowing that you actually initiated the investigation through this Julie Roys,
nobody would know anything.
Yeah.
Julie Roys. Nobody would know anything because all they've communicated is that it was non-criminal. They never communicated even the 9 felonies. They're only communicating, like I said, inside. And I think that's really not great too. All of your communication at this point should be public for the sake of accountability. Because in these inside communications that we don't get conveniently because they kicked us out of the church, so we don't get the member emails, they have lies. So great people who are doing God's work are sending us screenshots of those communications. But it is just wildly wrong. It makes you think, what else is going on?
Yeah, truly. So Ginny, we have to wrap up. But I want to ask one final question. You and your family, from the conversation we were having before starting recording and throughout, it sounds like you're still choosing to trust Christian fellowship and to place a priority on that. How hard is that for you and how are you making it happen? Why are you prioritizing it, I should say?
So I want to say that our kids are thriving and our family is thriving. Mm-hmm. God, through a just random, I'll say it very, very quickly. This is how God works. God cares. God is close to the brokenhearted. Mm-hmm. Blessed are you when you're persecuted for what's right, for righteousness' sake. So God has come through for us and for our kids, as we always know that he does. We got invited to a random birthday party last summer. I was speaking at a conference here in Michigan, and this woman came up and said, with a little piece of paper, here's my number, and my daughter wants to invite your daughter to her birthday party. Aww. And because we had like no other friends hardly at that time, I went to this birthday party, and while I was there, I met these other moms and found out about this homeschool partnership program. That's a different direction than we ever drive, and I didn't know about it. And so we have joined in with that, and it has been, when the Bible talks about beyond what you could ask or imagine, it has been beyond. It is called Washtenaw Christian Academy. It is in Saline, Michigan, and it is a wonderful, wonderful place filled with trusting adults. There's a lot of accountability there, all sorts of opportunities for our kids. They have so many more friends than they had before, so many more opportunities that they had before, and they are thriving all 5, which everyone knows if you've got a large family, it's hard to find a place where everybody thrives. Yeah. Our kids were just in this Sound of Music play we were at last night. They're playing golf, they're playing basketball. They have all of these friendships, and God is faithful. I think I want to end with a message that God is faithful. He is close to the brokenhearted. There's a verse that says, you reap. I just talked about with Annie F. Downs. You weep with tears, and like your tears are a seed that you sow. It's, I don't know, I'm butchering it, but it's a really good verse.
I get the gist of it.
Yeah. So it's a really, really good verse. I actually might have it here, but I want to encourage that God is good, that God is faithful, and that God redeems. And also, we need to be very, very careful. And especially in this day and age, the requirements for leadership are very, very clear. And I think that we have to make sure that our leaders are following them. Yeah.
Okay. So Ginny, I know that you have to get going. So let people know if they're not already following you, which likely they might already be. But anyway, just tell them where they can follow you.
Everything is just 1,000 hours outside. If someone is a homeschool family, I do have a new homeschooling book coming out in May called Homeschooling You're Doing It Right.
Can't wait.
Doing it. You're doing it right just by doing it.
Yeah. Your last book, Until the Streetlights Come On, was so good, Ginny. I loved reading it.
Thank you. So that's coming out. And I found the verse. I want to say it.
Okay. Yeah.
Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy.
Oh, so good.
God is faithful.
That's so good. Thank you, Ginny, for joining us.
Thank you. This is the first time I've ever spoken publicly about this, except for a very small snippet that just slid out in a podcast episode I did with Greta Eskridge about pornography and talking to kids about pornography. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I said to Rita, I'm like, do we ask her about this? I think it's such an important conversation, but it feels so personal. And so thank you for being willing to share. Like you said, right? It's this undeclared war on childhood, and you've been fighting it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody. If you would leave us a review and you haven't done that yet, we would so appreciate that. You can subscribe, follow, hit the bell on Spotify. That way we will show up on your Spotify feed or your Apple feed when you open up to find a podcast. And your reviews just go a long way towards helping us reach new listeners. And it also just lets us know that you're with us, and it means a lot to us. And if you want to follow us outside of the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at Boom Clap Podcast. Or individually, I'm on Instagram at Cecily.Dickey or my website, thegracetogrow.com.
And you can find me at RitaRogersCo.com or Rita Rogers Co on Instagram. Thanks for listening.